Welcome to the first episode of the Fifth Row Podcast. We really couldn't have asked for a better first guest. We got JT Rogan in the house tonight.
Good evening, San Diego. My name is JT Rogan, and I'm a senior running back at Coronado High.
He's a man of many hats who's had a very diverse and successful career in the sports world.
I'm here with head coach Lamont Smith for USD. Coach, what's it going to take for you guys to come out here and get a victory today?
This guy's an absolute stud. He's the most positive, generous, and motivated person I've ever had the privilege of speaking to, and the guy's resume speaks for itself. I mean, he's been an elite college football player with runs like these and with hits like these. But he isn't just the ultimate athlete. He's also the ultimate fan.
I've got a lot of passion for the school and like to support my friends and figure, if I could give a little bit of an advantage to our team, I'd be all for it.
Everyone knows JT's voice. It projects quite well.
Strike out!
I don't know how you couldn't want that guy in your stands. And that's honestly just the tip of the iceberg. This guy's professional career has taken him from college coaching, which catapulted him into multiple national broadcasting gigs. And as you'd expect from a winner like him, he's a successful entrepreneur. Most recently, he's the host of the If You Don't Grind podcast.
Hey, thanks for telling me to dress up.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, we both look really sharp, exceedingly sharp for this.
And if you're looking for motivation, go check it out. He's the benchmark for motivation and positivity. And here he is, JT Rogan. Welcome to another episode of the Fifth Row Podcast. This is our second episode now, and we have JT Rogan in the building today. He is a man of many hats and many talents, and we're very thankful to have him in here today. Thank you again for making the journey up here. So we'll just get right into it, man. Again, I think your parents missed an opportunity with calling you James Tyler Elliott Rogan instead of James Elliott Tyler Rogan. It could have been the Jet. You could have been the Jet, just like was Benny's in the Sandlot. It was Benny the Jet, right?
Yeah. Don't make my mom fly 3,000 miles from New York City to come slap you.
Yeah. It sounds like it would be an honor. She sounds like a great lady.
No, she's world class. She was indecisive, gave me two middle names, and I love the initials. My dad's name is James. And so he wanted to differentiate me. And so I've always been JT. And, I've got a son who I am not calling by initials, Roy Thomas Rogan. But I've got family members who call him RT against my wishes. And so, whatever. People are whatever you call them. So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And that's great. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So just getting right into it, you grew up in San Diego. It sounds like bounced around a little bit. Your mom married a couple times. What was that like growing up in San Diego?
It's awesome. Loved it. Diehard Padres fan. So, the way that they've been spending money in free agency, I'm juiced about that. And living in Seattle, it's nice to be able to, see them, in interleague play and be able to cheer for the Mariners without that really affecting the Padres' chances. But Padres diehard for sure. Was a pretty big Chargers fan too. Really, really enjoyed what they were doing. They moved to LA and, that's it. We just cut ties immediately.
Sure.
But
understandable.
Went to the 98 World Series, like memories of Jack Murphy and, Qualcomm as the corporates call it. And so just, went to University of San Diego, lived there until I was about 30 years old and just a huge San Diego fan through and through.
So just out of curiosity, who's your NFL team now?
I know so many coaches and players that it's like fantasy football leagues. People are like, oh yeah, I got Andrew Luck in this league and I got, Russell Wilson. And it's like, at some point you're just cheering for everyone. So you can't even have a team,
And
so
absolutely.
Like literally in LA, I know like David Long on the Rams and then Pep Hamilton I worked with at Stanford and Michigan. He's a quarterbacks coach for the Chargers.
He did a phenomenal job this year.
Yeah. Right. With
Amazing
Herbert,
job.
shout out.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so and Kevin O'Connell, who I think is the offensive coordinator for the Rams, like when you start knowing all these people, it's like, you just want them to do well. I think you don't
absolutely.
How can if you cheer for one that's going to diminish someone else, and so I cheer for the people I know and hope they do their best. And so shout out Scott Turner, interviewed him a couple times, friend, offensive coordinator for the Skins. They threw some shade on him for that. They put up the graphic, week 17, 0 points scored on opening drives, and then they cut right to him in the booth.
Thanks.
And
that is harsh.
But then he drops a touchdown on him, and they end up winning the game because of, that the whole debacle with Sudfeld and everything. But, it's all good.
and you are a big supporter. You bleed USD. You bleed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You're a
sure.
big San Diego guy. You are a big supporter of all your friends. I mean, if there was a supporter, I think you were the perfect one to have in your camp. I've seen many things on the internet of you being very supportive, and you're a positive guy. I mean, there's nowhere. I don't see a weak point in your helping your friends out game there.
Well, back to USD, I was like, I'm going to have an awesome collegiate sports experience. I'm going to play, which I did. I'm going to go to games of other sports teams at USD. I'm going to support them. And so, I tried heckling at softball games.
Oh, we got it.
No,
softball games. This is
Softball games.
baseball. Oh yeah.
But the baseball game for sure, right? Like, and USD played, I think, last year at T-Mobile.
I'll never be able to call it that either, man.
I know. And you saw me stuttering there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, they were playing there. I was heckling there, and same head coach, Rich Hill, who I love.
And that's top tier heckling, by the way.
Thank
For
you.
people who
Thank
haven't seen it, please go check it out. It's on YouTube. JT Rogan heckling at USD.
Voice for the common Torero fan.
The voice for the common
that's right.
Torero fan. That's right. He was so detailed. He had a sheet. He had the rundown of all the opposing players. And he had everything, who they got dumped by in the 7th grade, what their batting average was.
I think
just
you and my
amazing
buddy
stuff.
Joey would get along. He does it at Mariners games. He's been kicked out a couple times.
Yeah.
Because they got the railing right outside the bullpen there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you can go. Yeah, same thing. Looks up their Wikipedia page, knows the divorces, all that type of stuff.
So at USD, I tried softball, and I had dads coming after me.
I'm sure.
I mean, I did it at Pepperdine, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I'm up at Pepperdine, and I went to St. Mary's, and I got opposing parents. So, you can't do that. They've never seen that there, right? Because it's WCC. Outside of Gonzaga, they're known for nothing, right? And
Gonzaga's not going to do anything to you.
No. I've never been to the Kennel. I will, at some point, because it's a great venue and they've got a great team and everything. But I'm at Pepperdine, and 2 women come up to me and they start taking me to task, and little did I know that this guy had 2 moms for parents. And so they were standing up for their baby boy.
Oh.
And I didn't know there was a lesbian parent couple.
Oh, no.
Oh, they were big mad.
They were very upset with you.
And then I hit him with the, you can't pitch and your mom can't argue.
Why not double down?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're already in it, right?
You're
If you're going to get wet, you might as well go swimming.
Yes. Never profanity. I don't want to do that. I don't want to give them grounds to kick me out. And so when I started going to baseball games and heckling, our own USD event, people were like, yeah, you can't do that. You can't. And so kind of had to keep getting that opportunity. And sometimes if the opposing parents complained enough, then it would be okay, hey, JT, we really need you to just focus on supporting our own team. Don't talk about the other team and so whatever. But mostly I can't do that anymore. If I go with my wife, or if I've got some sort, when I was Harbaugh's right hand man,
Sure.
Can't be showing up at Michigan games being
No.
wearing out other people. I'm hey, shouldn't you not be doing that? So
Yeah.
I'll tell you firsthand, and it's tough with a kid, a young child too.
Oh, yeah.
People look at you different when you have your son next to you and you're trying to heckle.
how could you possibly raise your child?
He's not even paying attention to me. Don't worry. But so you actually, just to get into a few of your accolades, you in high school you started. People know you as a big football player, but you were actually 2-time All-League in baseball as well.
Yeah.
So did the heckling start when you were on the bench?
No.
Or did they cut that out when you were actually playing?
No, I've got a lot of respect when I'm in competition, and never celebrated touchdowns. That wasn't my thing. In baseball, though, proudly, first varsity hit off of Adam Jones.
That's right. I've read that.
Sorry. I'm proud of it.
No,
because
that's amazing, man. What a
And then my senior year, we faced Mission Bay 5 times, and 4 of those times Matt Bush pitched. And if you know Matt Bush, he's got a real checkered past, but he was the #1 overall pick in the 2004 draft by the San Diego Padres. And so hometown kid, he ended up going to jail, almost killed somebody, I think vehicular manslaughter, came out of prison, was on work release, like throwing in the parking lot, got picked back up by the Texas Rangers and made it back to the pros and everything. I thought that I had gotten some hits off of him, but it turned out that I just misremembered. So I got the statisticians like, yeah, you were like 0 for 11 with 7 Ks. And I'm like,
It's like weird. I don't remember it that way.
That's the worst, right? When your memory deceives you and someone you're like, oh man, this changes everything.
Yeah. So now I just talk about how I like beat out an infield single against him, when he wasn't on the mound.
Got to have some sort of victory in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what were your playing days like in football? You were an elite high school player. I mean, if we can get into it, led your team in rushing, passing, and receiving, I believe, in your sophomore year.
Never passing, but tackling.
Yeah. Rushing, tackling, and receiving.
Yeah, you are
your sophomore year.
You are so well researced, Nick. I got most improved that year, by the way. I got most
improved. What was your freshman year
like? Did you miss that? I think he must have missed that.
No. I was like, what more do I need to do?
Yeah, no kidding, man. So you, I'd love to get into this because you come in and from the look of it, you've always had the same intensity. I doubt that it was any different when you were in high school. I'm sure you were the same guy that you are now. I think we all are. And did you immediately hit the field with that intensity freshman year?
I've never known how to play the game any differently. So I've never run out of bounds. Always craved contact.
Agreed. Every one of your highlights I saw is either up the middle or you're making a block. Pretty much.
And part of the challenge is I never got to be fast enough only until like towards the end of my career. I never got to be fast enough to be able to like run away from people. And so it was always just contact all the time. And then that's just kind of how I, decided I was going to be as a player. And I had to play both ways in high school. So I had to play special teams, offense and defense. And so it was always just, doing the work. And to me, that's the best part of the competition out there is just being able to, to be physical. And you have the license to be able to do that inside of the 53 and a third by 100 yard or 120 yard if you want to include the end zones. Yeah. Those dimensions.
Was your high school a big football program high school or mediocre?
No, pretty mediocre. Didn't really produce much in the way of football talent. And, but it was an awesome experience. I think –
I disagree because you came out of there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
But also, you guys you won. It wasn't state, but it was you won your league championships, right? Your sophomore year, I believe.
Junior year. Yeah, and some fun high school stuff. Like we played in Canada. We played at Calgary Stampeder Stadium.
Nice.
My sophomore year and my senior year, and so it was a lot of fun. And I was always small and undersized, and everybody discounted me, including Harbaugh. Harbaugh was like, he would tell people because we lived in the same town. So Coach Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh was my college football coach at USD.
Right.
But when recruiting me, he was just telling people like, he's not very good. Like he's not tall.
Okay. So
yeah, I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah.
Because you used to work with my younger brother.
Yeah.
And he would always, when he was telling me about you, he said, JT's got this great story about how, Harbaugh would always be telling him, you're never going to play for me. You're never going to play for me. And, what's that like hearing that as an athlete coming up? Does it motivate you? I mean, I think a guy like you might seem motivated for something like that, but how does that affect certain athletes?
I just didn't care.
That's the best attitude to have, man. Seriously.
It is.
If you listen to all the things that people tell you that you can't do, you're not going to do anything.
That's right.
And so for me, it was just another person. The basketball coach told me when I quit basketball after my sophomore year that I wouldn't be able to be senior athlete of the year. Like that was even something I even cared about. And I ended up winning co-athlete of the year with like an Olympic caliber water polo player. So I was like, yeah, well, it turned out okay.
Right.
But everybody would say, my Pop Warner coach is like, oh yeah, he's not gonna be able to cut it in college football. And so you, with your limited perspective, and people do this all the time, they tell you, hey, you got to have a plan B. I'm like, well, what if my plan A can make me a gazillionaire, and then my plan B is just like my plan C through Z. They're all really average. Like, invest in your plan A. And so I had all of these people who were school teachers and who were varsity basketball coaches who rarely won league championships telling me what they thought I could do. And then on the flip side of that, I had a professional football coach coaching at a non-scholarship football school telling me that he didn't think I was good enough for his program. So he didn't have a realistic understanding of how good I could be or what the program was that I was going into. And the high school and Pop Warner coaches didn't have a realistic understanding of what my potential was and really what that leap would look like from where they thought I was to where I ended up being. And so it still even took me a while to fully invest and dedicate myself into being as good as I knew that I could possibly be. And once I finally did that, my career took off.
And it feels good too. There's nothing like that feeling of overcoming, not really the odds, but just proving the doubters wrong, right? There's just, in my opinion, there's no feeling like it. I mean, I think everyone in this room at one point had someone tell them, you're not going to do this, you're not going to amount to this. And when you do finally succeed, it's jubilation.
Yeah, I mean, completely. And so I went to USD and they kind of weren't interested in me. You know, they didn't think I'd be very good. And I was like, well, San Diego's pretty cool. I like the beach, you know. I kind of took it easy. I didn't really do much. Like my first year, I gained like 5 pounds, you know, and just kept.
Well, I saw that you were recruited before we move on to your college playing days. I saw that you had a few recruit letters, like for sure. You were Dartmouth. You had a few of the sort of Ivy League-ish schools on your list.
So many nibbles, no bites.
Okay.
You know, and really, with the exception of Mike Maynard, the head coach at Redlands, there was nobody from a 4-year institution who really wanted me to play football for them. And Harbaugh kind of like begrudgingly took me. And so he had 105 guys that he brought in.
I heard a story that you ran into him at the grocery store. Is that true?
No, he was buying chewing tobacco at the liquor store.
But you ran into him, nevertheless.
Yes,
you ran into him.
Yes.
What were you buying? Liquor.
No, I was driving home. I lived 4 blocks from the liquor store, Avenue Liquor.
Did you see him and you pulled up to him?
Yeah, exactly right. So I was turning. I was in the island at 9th and Orange, and I mean I remember it like yesterday. And he told me to like stay by the phone, which is an NFL term.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Kind of like bring your playbook. It's like, hey, stay by the phone. Like you never know when we're gonna call you.
What did you feel when he said that?
I stay by my phone all the time. I've got a cell phone. It's what I do.
It's connected to me. Yeah.
And
did that encourage you at all to think more about going, because they're a non-scholarship school like you mentioned, so it's assumingly you didn't have a lot of money to like just shell out for any school you wanted to go to, so why did you end up considering? Was it because you pulled up and maybe it was destiny sort of thought?
No. So I was already committed to going there as a student, and then it's kind of up to me whether or not I want to play football. He's like, well, stay by the phone, and so kind of as like a favor to the community, he brings me in, and he brings me in after like a couple guys get like medically disqualified, like John Bolin, who's the son of the owner of the Broncos or the Broncos family. Right. He gets medically disqualified. And
there was another guy who was above you, Evan
Harney.
Yeah, and he had a freak accident, if I read that right.
Yeah, so that was my second year. But so just my first year, like they bring me into camp, and I'm like the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the barrel. They even had like San Diego running backs above me, like who were incoming freshmen. So I was like, looking up from the bottom of the depth chart. And I just kept busting my ass, right? Like I never missed a practice. I kept doing things, as much as I could do, however I could do it. And I worked my way up to rooming with Evan for the first game of the year.
Wow.
So we bused to Azusa Pacific. So I didn't room, but the second game of the year at Holy Cross, we traveled all the way to Worcester, Massachusetts. And I roomed with him. So I was like, I'm like second string, but they ended up redshirting me.
Sorry. Your first year you roomed with Evan.
Yeah, for the first game, and then they eventually told me that I was redshirting, and so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you knew the person who eventually would leave that you could take their spot. You knew him prior to this. Like you had a relationship with him.
Evan was great, and he was an awesome teammate. He was an absolute stud, and
he was an All-American too, right? Or he was very decorated as a player. He was,
yeah. And so he, along with Marshawn Lynch, and I saw each of them in football capacity. So Marshawn came to one of our games because his quarterback in high school was my quarterback in college, Josh Johnson, who's still in the NFL.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Shout out. Yeah.
Crazy.
The Goose. We call him the Goose. He doesn't like that nickname. We call him the Goose. And he's actually sharing a locker with Tyler Gaffney, who was a running back at Stanford, who I coached on the coach staff. I was texting with Gaff last night. And he's legit. If he ever stays healthy and really wants to do it, he could be a sleeper and awake and crushing it. But Evan was incredible. and Marshawn was obviously incredible. I just remember looking at each of them being like, man, if this is what it takes to be a running back, like I'm really up against it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I can see looking at Marshawn Lynch and just thinking like,
Yeah. I saw him on the sideline because he came to our UC Davis game in like 2006. And I'm like, man, there he is. He's probably a month away from winning the Vegas Bowl or something like that, and so Evan was phenomenal. And I was just like, I knew that I was behind him and I wasn't going to get in front of him. And so I was just kind of lazy, and I wasn't like, I would always practice hard and I would lift hard enough, but I never was fully invested in it. And I think so many people in life are that way, right? Where they're just, they're there and they're showing up and they're going through the motions and they're doing the right things, but it takes that real commitment and dedication to what you're doing. And when you know it when you see it, when you just see somebody who's so dedicated to what they're doing and they make it their passion, whether it's, scrubbing floors or, doing street art or anything like that, you love to see them do it because you know how important it is to them. And so when you have that level of dedication and commitment, it allows you to achieve it at the highest levels.
Cool. Well, hold that thought because we're going to get back to that. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, so I want to kind of get back to that, your playing days, and kind of the process that you went through working your way up that depth chart. Kind of take everyone through. I didn't play college football. I had a roommate my freshman year at Oregon that kind of worked his way up the depth chart as a walk-on. He never knew that he was going to get playing time at all. Man, I can't even count on hands how many times you tell me I want to quit. I don't know if I'm ever going to play. What the hell am I doing? What's the purpose of this? I don't know if you had the exact same trajectory, but what was that like?
So let me start by saying USD, non-scholarship school, as I mentioned before, but we churn out NFL players. We've got Jamal Agnew, punt returner, wide receiver, Swiss Army knife for the Lions, Ross Dwelly, tight end for the Niners. We've got Josh Johnson, the quarterback. We've got Eric Bakhtiari's played, and he was on a few different teams. And we've had tons of guys in camps, tryouts, everything like that. And so for me, I got there my first year and I just coasted. And I was like, man, spring football was the first time I'd ever done spring football. I'm like, practicing for no games? I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, I don't know if I want to play anymore. And I think about it, I'm like, my dad loves me playing football and, comes out at the beginning of each year and watches me play. And so, okay, I'll do that. So my second year, getting ready to go into training camp, a week before training camp starts, the starter, All-American, falls down a hill, fractures his skull, never ends up playing again. And
crazy story.
Yeah. And so they kind of like, well, you're going to split time with this other back who's like 50 pounds and 5 inches bigger than you are. I'm like, okay. And then eventually they start to see like, I run like, a pit bull or whatever. And like I run big and I get short yardage and goal line situations. So they end up making me the starter. And then I never, relinquished the job after that. But each year my commitment keeps going up. So after, so my redshirt year, nothing. Right. And then, my second year, I run for about 1,000 yards. And I'm like, okay, I really need to dedicate myself to this. And I can't be in San Diego. I need to eliminate the distractions. I go up to Oakland and I work on the projects right around New Jack City, 69th and San Leandro, right up in that neighborhood. And so I'm working construction. Like I am rebuilding the projects there in the summer, working out with my uncle, who was like an alternate for the 1984 Olympics for weightlifting. So I'm working by day, working out at night, and that's all I was doing. And so I come back and I'm like, a better version of myself for sure in year 3. And then in year 4, they're like, hey, the team needs you to stick around here, stay, work with the guys. I'm like, okay, great. I'll do your training program. So I do that. My 4th year goes really well. I end up earning All-American honors. And then finally I'm like, getting ready into my 5th year, I need to go back to that training atmosphere where it's just work and working out. So I ended up working in Emeryville for like a developer, and working a little less and just focusing on workouts. And so I was running and I was swimming and I was lifting and I was an absolute like machine, and built myself up to like huge, like 200 pounds, probably running 4.5, maybe high 4.4, like levels that I never thought that I would be capable of, but because I didn't believe in myself soon enough. And that's my biggest regret, is I didn't fully commit to being the best version of myself as soon as possible. And so I mentor college athletes right now and I tell them, like, give yourself that credit. Remember that stuff. Believe in yourself. Like I talk to guys who transfer from Michigan. I'm like, don't forget about when you were dominating guys who are in the NFL right now. You played against Donovan Peoples-Jones. You played against Cesar Ruiz. You played against these guys who are in the NFL right now. Like you are a breath away from that. And so keep capturing that and keep owning that greatness that you've had. And so at USD, it's tougher because it feels like it's so far away. But we laid the foundation for guys who have now started to get a look, and guys are going all the time. We've got Reed Sinnett right now, I think, on the Dolphins as a backup quarterback right now for Tua and Fitzpatrick. So just we keep churning guys out left and right. And so, yeah, you got to keep busting your ass, and you just got to keep working. If it's important to you, you do it every day. You brush your teeth, you sleep, you shower. Like, you got to keep dedicating yourself to the craft and being serious about it. And it's that way for anything in life. You guys get that.
Yeah,
right.
And you mentioned, like, you know, eliminating distractions and having to leave San Diego. How hard is that when you're a young man, you know, in college? You know, this is like you're in your like the prime of your youth. I know, at least for my roommate, I mean, it was impossible for him to eliminate that type of stuff. We were drinking 3 to 4 nights a week our freshman year in college, and he was right there with us. And I think eventually he moved on from that. But I mean, it's really difficult, right?
I wasn't good enough to drink, you know, during the season. I wasn't good enough to be distracted and I didn't have the discipline. And so I just removed the temptation. Like, that's the easiest way to do it. Just remove the temptation. And so I did that. And so when I was up there training and really focused on it, and then surrounding myself, like, my roommate was I started out, you know, my freshman year, I'm in a dorm. And then my sophomore year, lived with 4 guys. You know, one of them flunked out, you know, another guy transferred. Then my junior year, you know, one guy thinks about quitting, you know, another guy ends up being like a theater major. And so in my 4th year, I lived with less guys. And then ultimately my 5th year, I just lived with my best man, John Matthews, who ended up going to the NFL. And he ended up playing for the Colts and the Jaguars and a cup of coffee with a couple other teams. But he and I were very similar, and he would always push me. And so you surround yourself with the good environment and the good people. And they say you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most, you know, So don't have people bringing you down, have people pulling you up.
Agreed. One thing that I've found is hard to hone in on is people always tell you to surround yourself with good people. But what I found in my life is it's hard to find out what the good person is until you really get to know them. Right. Like, I've made a lot of, I won't say bad decisions, but it turned out to be the wrong decision because I chose the wrong person to trust with the wrong thing, right? Yeah. And so how did you go about deciding who you were going to keep in your life, who you're going to keep around you?
Well, I mean, part of it's intuition, right? So you're born with some things or you're not, right? And so I'm going to chalk some of that up to just my mom and dad raising me the right way with genetics and love and everything that way. But, you know, I tried to surround myself with the people who exhibited the traits that I knew I wanted to have more of. And so the people that you surround yourself with for love and compassion are different than the people that you surround yourself for intellectual challenging, right? So I got a friend who went to Harvard, Will Nygaard, was like a genius, right? And then I've got, you know, friends who are lawyers, and I've got friends who are like degenerates. Like, I had a groomsman, you know, who's basically never had a job, you know, but like, he's so raw and real and awesome and natural. Like, that fills me up, and so a diverse cross section of people. And so, you know, I do my best to surround myself. Like, the most important decision you'll ever make in your life is who you marry, if you get married. Because if you're wrong, you're losing half, you know, and if you're right, you know, you get the opportunity to experience all this additional joy and things that come along with a satisfying marriage and children, and your heart gets bigger, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it's not easy. You know,
it's not. No. And I think I tell my girlfriend this all the time, that the older I get, I just try to surround myself with good people, whatever that may mean. I just want them to be good people. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. I don't care. I want you to be good, nice people if you're around me and my family.
Yeah, and you can get distracted, right? Because you're so hyper focused on whatever project or job that you end up surrounding yourself with all of the people in that environment more, because you like the environment and you're trying to like the people, but the people aren't good for you, or whatever that is, right? And so it's definitely a challenge. And so people need to set goals for themselves, and they need to take inventory and audit and recalibrate. And so that's how it is in life. Like, if you don't have a goal to know where you're going, you're not going to know how to get there. And so you're going to allow people, places, and things to pull you away from what it is that you want for yourself, if you don't know what it is that you want and you don't use it as an anchor. So if you say, like I want to slam dunk, right? I'm on a dunk program, right? What do you want for Christmas? I want a calf stretcher because I want to reduce the impingement in my ankle and in my heel, and I want to stretch out the muscles in the bottom of my foot. And so it's like, have a plan. You know?
Well, what's that saying, that if you want to do something, make everything about everything you do that day. The ultimate goal is, that's the end goal, right? Like, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth with the intention of it's going to help you with this, right?
That's a huge thought right there. And I was setting goals for myself every day. I wanted to drink 100 ounces of water. I wanted to get at least 7 hours of sleep and wake up before 7 a.m. I wanted to, I'd take pictures of my food and send it to a guy. I wanted to get a workout in every day. I would do all of these things, right? Read my affirmations and I got to be so spread out because I was trying to do all this stuff where I'm like, okay, well, this is all going really well, but you know, I'd like my marriage to improve. And so I just made all my goals about my wife. And then you know what happened? Our marriage it's like skyrocketed, right? And so it's like, really, if you focus on what it is that you want for yourself and, you know, and you decide to dedicate yourself to being great at that thing or those select things, you know, you can't be everything to everyone, but you can be something to someone. And so you just figure that out and you get better.
That's a great
sentiment. And I think the point you made about direction is spot on, because it's rare, if ever, that someone just winds up in the perfect situation without having put any effort. You don't just like randomly wake up one day and it's like, oh yeah, you know, you're put in this great position to succeed. You have to work towards it.
Yeah. And so we were talking earlier and I just said every job's a job interview. Like I've had a lot of different jobs in life, and because of how good of an athlete I was and how dedicated I was as a player, I got the opportunity to be at Stanford. And I have not gotten one job in my life because of my resume and how good of an employee somebody thought I was. I got it because I knew someone. And so here's the domino effect. I go to Stanford with Coach Harbaugh. I work with Coach Shaw every single day. We're in the running backs room. He's coaching running backs. I'm alongside him. Fast forward a couple years, Pac-12 Network. He gives me a recommendation to Odele Hawkins. I end up working for them. Harbaugh calls me back, brings me to Michigan. You know, I get tickets for the CEO of Snap Rays and and a former teammate of mine who worked there at the time, Kenny Stivers. One game, Michigan State, you know, in 2016. I talked to Cole for like 3 minutes. He said he liked me, ends up hiring me, you know, and I was like begging for a job, gives me a job. You know, I work at Michigan with an intern, and then run into that intern on my honeymoon. And then now I'm working with him at this job and wouldn't have had the opportunity without him. It's like, don't treat anyone lowly. Don't neglect any opportunity. Don't ever do anything less than your best, because, you know, to give an Oregon shout out to my man, Steve Prefontaine, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
How much did playing football kind of help instill the principles that you live by? Because, you know, they say when you grow up, everyone should play football because it'll tell you a lot about yourself. You'll find out where your limits are. How much did that help you in your life?
You know, it allowed me to go further and do more. Like all of that stuff is manifested in how I played every sport. I played basketball the way I played football. I played baseball the way I played, just like kind of reckless, tough, you know.
A coach's dream, really. No, seriously. I mean, what every coach wants. Intense, never going to quit. Always there, always going to show up and give 110%, 150%.
Yeah, you knew what you were going to get with me, right? And so, you know, you take the good with the bad. But, you know, the football and the competition and the work ethic and the commitment and the dedication, and my favorite time to run the ball is when they knew it was coming. And so we had a drive to end a game. We were at Morehead State, and Phil Simms had built, like, he had his name on the locker room or the weightlifting shed out there in Morehead, Kentucky, you know, and there are plenty of jokes about that. I would rifle them off every year before we played them. And so, you know, we ran, it was like, I don't know, 8 minutes, just ran the ball every single play and started it deep in our territory, and the game ended deep in their territory, and we never passed the ball. And like, it was the best drive for a football enthusiast because you're just relentlessly running the ball and there's nothing they can do about it.
So I'm going to assume you're very pro running backs matter.
You know what running backs matter for? Pass blocking. Because if I see another running back who can't pass block, man, it's going to kill me. Like when guys are doing these Olay blocks and everything, like do the little things, you know, like, you know, if guys are fast, guys are strong. Like, you know, I love the running backs. I love to see all the different running back types, but my thing was pass blocking, man. Like I got to love pass blocking, and that's just because I'm a little tweaked and I'm a degenerate. And yes, running back lives matter, but I want to see running backs do the hard things, like, you know, and that's like guys running out of bounds. Like I know you're trying to preserve your career, and you know you only have a short shelf life and everything. It's just not my style. It doesn't resonate with me.
So I gotta believe you're a big Derrick Henry fan. You know, like as far as like contemporary running backs that are playing in the league right now, you gotta love watching that.
Yeah, that's great football to see. Like that's fun to watch. And I marvel and appreciated all the other running backs too. But when you're a physical runner, and you know run behind your pads, as all the broadcasters like to say, then put your foot in the ground and get downhill. You know, all these cliche played out phrases. You know, like that's the good stuff.
And that's definitely, I mean, what you're speaking is definitely how you played. I've seen enough of your highlight reels to know how you played. And just going back to your time at USD, you were playing, like you're saying, 2009, you get injured. So you have an amazing 4 years, essentially. And then you go into the season, and it sounds like on the play you got injured, you were also just having your way with the team. It was off a kickoff return. You returned the ball like 35 yards, and then on the next subsequent play, you were, again, another like 40-yard gain, and it was a non-contact, like making a move, something like that, right?
Yeah, and I think that, that summer I had trained a lot, maybe overtrained or didn't have the right, muscular balance. And so, yeah, it was just a freakish injury. And I think that the frequency with which ACL tears happen is like outrageous, and I would hope that within the next decade that we could really get that figured out, because it's affecting careers all the time.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like it's rocket science to me. You've got, the PCL, MCL, LCL, and ACL, and the ACL is getting torn all the time. And so, they've got lineman knee braces that frequently help prevent it. You just can't afford to lose guys to ACL tears.
I agreed. I have a friend who's not an athlete, and he used to be an athlete when we were younger, and then tore his ACL on both legs multiple times. And it's just this process of every time, which kind of surgery you're going to get. Are you going to get the cadaver? Are you going to do this? How are you going to do it? And anyway, so you have this. You're on a high, and you're brought low by something that's totally out of your control. Maybe, like you said, due to just the body's not meant to move as fast as you were making it grow, and who knows what happened, freak injury. So what do you do after that happens? Are you back in the lab, or are you just like immediately ready to go back out on the field, or you take a moment to consider your options? It's your senior year, you're about to graduate, very academically minded already, so this isn't your only option.
Yeah, so I talked to two doctors, and one says do it sooner, another one says do it later. I decided to do it a little bit later, and he was a orthopedic surgeon for the New York Giants at some point. And so, appreciated that consultation. And then I got back to work, and I just started, what can I do to get back, to get healthy, to get playing? And so, the university tells me, well, you're probably not going to be able to get a sixth year. It's really difficult. We're going to give you a 15% chance because we just don't think that you'll be able to get a waiver. You get 5 years to play 4. And then the doctor's like, you're going to need to have another surgery. I know that we did it in September, but it's just not getting all full flexibility, full range of motion. We're going to have to go in there and do another scope in January. It's going to set you back a little bit. And so everybody's kind of like, writing my tombstone, and my obituary as far as it comes to being an athlete. And the next season starts, and, they let me play defense and have me on special teams because, they just don't think I'm going to be very good. And then, after the first quarter, we're scoreless. They put me in at running back. I score the first touchdown of the year, end up winning team MVP. And this goes for all of football and most sports, but people don't know how hard I worked to get there. I was taking herbal remedies. I was taking, not marijuana. I mean, nothing against it. I was just taking these Asian elixir pills, and I didn't even know what they were. But I was I was doing that. I was getting laser therapy. I was doing physical therapy. I was out there with our strength and conditioning coach. I mean, whatever I could do to give myself an opportunity. I mean, I would go up to Orange County and work with Vic Rakshani and work just brutal massage, just constantly trying to get, that range of motion and all of that. And so just being dedicated to the craft, guys don't just show up on Sunday, man. It is a full-time job. And if you want to be great at it, I mean, and I've heard Russell Wilson stories. I mean, he's waking up in the middle of the night, and interrupting his sleep because his rehabilitation is more important than, the sleep cycle or however he conditions himself for that recovery.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break real quick again there.
Cool.
We'll be right back. So we just want to keep that going of how you made the transition from being an athlete, you're a full-time, very dedicated athlete, to having to realize that maybe was coming to an end and now having to transition into doing something else. Your next move was... So
I tried out, tried to play CFL, UFL, all the leagues, NFL. I sent letters to just about every team, and they're like, yeah, God, 5'10", 190-pound white running back off a knee injury. Yeah. okay,
Yeah.
we'll keep your name right over here. So nobody was really about, bringing me on at that point. And I ended up trying out after Kyle Williams dropped 2 punts in the NFC Championship.
Remember that?
Yeah,
Never forget that.
Ended up trying out as a punt returner. And so Johnny Lee Higgins, who was a Pro Bowl punt returner for the Raiders in 2008, I think, and myself, we were like the two guys who were just out there catching everything. And it's because I knew I was going to a tryout with the Niners. So I made sure that I was ready and prepared. And so Darren Bennett and Michael Husted and like John Carney and a lot of kickers operate out of San Diego. And so I would go down there and they would just be kicking. And I'd be like, hey, do you mind if I catch them? And so I'm catching punters, left-footed punts, right-footed punts, high hangers, low line drive, knuckleballs, all that stuff. And so when they're punting out of a jugs machine, we're just like, yeah, no problem, right? And so it's like, it's not hard to prepare for these things, but you'd be amazed how many guys would show up at these tryouts and wouldn't be able to do a 3-cone drill or short shuttle or catch these punts. And so so I was trying to play professional football, and then finally I ended up having to get a third knee surgery, and they're like, hey, you should probably hang it up. And so I'm like struggling. I'm like, okay, this has been my identity for so long, right? And I've continued to identify myself as a football player. And one of the biggest sins I think that Woody Hayes would say is that you can't allow people to think that being great at football makes you better than anyone else, right? And you can't let that be your identity, because if somebody can take that away from you, you tear your ACL, or the NFL ceases to play a season, what are you then? Like, you need to be a good husband and father and friend and all that stuff, right? And be great in other aspects of your life. And so you can't identify yourself strictly as a football player, but that's who I was. And so a lot of learning, growth, and maturation took place in my mid-20s, where I went from being a football player to then understanding, okay, what does life consist of? How do I pay bills? What do I need to do in order to be successful in life? And so that took a little bit of figuring out, but I started to get on the right trajectory and feel like I'm on a pretty good track right now.
Yeah, agreed. And so
definitely.
Yeah, your next move was to go to Stanford. And how did you end up there?
Yeah, it's Coach Harbaugh invited me up there, and people are like, "Oh, you got to go." So I went up there and spent a season, which was an awesome season, 2010. So many great coaches on that coaching staff, and I'm going to omit some names just out of either forgetfulness or otherwise. But Derek Mason, who was the coach at Vanderbilt up until this season, Vic Fangio, head coach of the Broncos, Tim Drevno, recently O-line coach, a pass game coordinator at USC, got let go. Greg Roman, who's the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Coach Harbaugh, Coach Shaw, who's now the head coach at Stanford.
Wow, yeah. What a list.
There was that's just the coaching staff. There was a lot of talent on that team.
Yeah, so Pep Hamilton, who's the quarterback's coach for the Chargers, Aaron Moorhead, who's wide receivers coach for the Eagles, Lance Anderson, who's a defensive coordinator for Stanford. So many really talented coaches, but the players on that team,
unreal,
and they were great dudes too. Every single one of them. I gave Doug Baldwin his Orange Bowl ring. He had to miss it. Like all of the guys, like Richard Sherman. So many great dudes that I keep in touch with, like to this day, like Trent Murphy, Josh Morrow, like Andrew Luck. We were sending baby pictures to one another. So
that's
many
crazy.
awesome dudes. And he's a phenomenal guy. And if he ever decides to dust the cleats off, which I don't know that he will, he's phenomenal. And people diminish his greatness. Like him and Russell are the two fourth quarter and comeback wizards.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's always been a comparison between them in that 2012 draft. Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson. Unfortunately, that debate is over, because I liked it at the time. Because Seahawks fans would always go back and forth with Colts fans, which was the better quarterback. And it was fun going back and forth with them. Unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure we must have been at the same stadium that year, because I actually drove down from Eugene to Palo Alto to watch the Stanford game. And I think you got, unless it was the year later.
No, that was 2011.
That was 11?
But I was at that game.
Okay.
So in your defense, you're right.
Okay, yeah. We went down there. We were all excited. We thought we were going to, just blow the doors off Stanford. And you guys beat the hell out of us. So that was
well, that 2010 game, I've never had an experience like Autzen before. It's different. Autzen and then the whiteout at Penn State. Like, those are two.
It gets aggressive at Autzen.
Yeah.
It does.
So we were up, I think it was 21-3, and then maybe Oregon scored a touchdown to make it like 21-10, and then onside kick, and touchdown. And LaMichael James ended up having a huge game. It was 52-21. Like it was like 48 unanswered points or something crazy.
Yeah, we those were fun times between Oregon and Stanford. Those were really good times.
Yeah. Great game. And USC was good at that time too. The Pac-12 was up then, but I think part of what's happened is the disparity in salaries and the TV revenue. Like the fact that Cristobal got extended for $4.5 million a year, and Saban and Dabo make twice that.
I know.
You're not as dedicated to competing at that level if that's what you're paying your employees.
Yep.
Right. No, agreed. And you get what you pay for, right?
Yep.
Like
that's why there was a lot of concern him going to Auburn, because they said, hey, the SEC's got more money. They're going to shell out probably twice what he could have got at Oregon. Fortunately, he stayed. But yeah, that's why I was definitely afraid he was going.
So around the same time that you were coaching at Stanford, you started or got on board early with a transportation company called Q-Star.
Yep.
How did you start getting involved with that?
A friend of mine in Coronado started it up, wanted my help, and
was it an older brother from someone you went to high school with, or was it just somebody that you knew?
He had coached teams.
He was a coach for your football team, right?
Yeah, but he wasn't a ton older, right? Maybe like 10 years older.
Sure.
And so we just, I had the time and the work ethic, and so we just drove, a black SUV and black town cars. And
was it just you and him at the beginning, or was it a staff of employees?
No, it was. And then we ended up getting, different employees and getting more vehicles, and ultimately getting a Sprinter van, and doing like, really nice high-end trips, like, 15-passenger van,
And you had a specific clientele, right? Or was it just a different kind of Uber?
So, we would do early on, we would do Uber SUV, Uber Black. Like I drove for Uber back when you literally had to be the closest person to the passenger at the airport.
Oh, really?
And so San Diego International Airport eventually was like, hey, you guys are banned. So they banned Uber in San Diego for 2 weeks before Uber did something about it. But I would literally just park, put on my hazards, walk inside, and it's different than SeaTac. And yeah, they'd be like, your phone would start beeping, you'd accept the ride. And they, so it was, so back in the day, but then we would also, we would talk with hotels, local hotels, and work on getting people and contracts. And the Hotel Del Coronado is really nice. It's one of 2 hotels that I understand in California that have ownership of the beach that their property is on.
Oh,
so it's
that's huge.
Really nice right there on the water. And, so got a chance to drive, really high-end like celebrity types like Jerry Springer and Enrique Iglesias' backup dancers and, all sorts of funny stuff. So,
yeah. Any cool stories that you want to share? Any PG stories?
There are definitely some X-rated stories.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Yeah. The driver holds many secrets.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just driving the car. No, I mean, just
no PG stories.
No, I mean, just fun to drive the athletes and talk to, I had a really awesome time. So I picked up Dick Enberg after a Dodgers-Padres game in Los Angeles. And I had to have Ron Bauer Chardonnay on ice waiting for him in the back seat. And I drove him home to his house in La Jolla for 2 hours, and he was just smooth and a cool customer. And you look back on his accolades and he's world class. And I had the benefit of being able to go out to dinner with him and interact with him a couple more times beyond that. But just fun to when you're with good people, I mean, you get some wild tips. I'd get $1,000, and for me, I was rich, but it was a lot of fun and just so many different types of people. And I'm an extrovert. I get filled up by all different types of people. And so all the different interactions were great. There was nothing that was ever too uncomfortable for me or whatever. And so it was all good.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be so much fun, especially at that age. You're just getting out of college. You're starting your career. You got nothing really going on, no responsibilities. Yeah, I'll drive all day. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So after that, you started really getting into broadcasting. That became your career from then until about 2016.
Yeah.
How did you initially get into that? Because that wasn't your major in college.
No, not at all. But, this is a really good story. And so, because I treated people well previously, they were willing to help me when it came time to do it. But I talked to Kevin Gemmel, who wrote for ESPN, Pac-12 blog with Chantel and a couple of the other guys. And they've redone their format and everything. And this is 6 years ago or whatever. Chantel Jennings, I think her name is. And so Kevin's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I kind of like to talk about sports. He's like, well, do you want to do it for radio or television? You want to be in front of the camera, behind the camera? Do you want to write about it? I'm like, I don't know. So I did what I would encourage anyone to do, especially during, pandemic or if you're unemployed or coronavirus, is just do everything. So I literally did radio, I wrote, I did television, I behind the camera, in front of the camera, NBC7 San Diego, Fox Sports San Diego, local college, local high school, like you name it, I can claim it, right? And so I just did it all. And you start to find like, oh God, radio's dying, and doing a pregame Saturday radio show for college football unpaid.
Right. Because you did that for one season, right? And then you gave that up.
I did that for a season. Like, can you imagine, okay, you're not at the game, and you're not watching games, and you're not listening to games. You're on Saturday, you're listening to a show about college football games.
While there's college football on.
Negative.
Yeah.
Not working, right?
But you also were on, you were at Time Warner. You were on Time Warner. You were a college game day host, sideline reporter for Fox San Diego. I mean, these are big productions. It's not like you were on the college sidelines with the students watching.
Yeah, and you just keep being a jackhammer. You keep showing up. And there are people that I worked with that were terrific and didn't get opportunities. And there were people that I worked with that were awful.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be how it works, right?
But they kept getting better, and they kept being persistent, and they get opportunities, right? So it's like squeaky wheel gets the grease, or whatever you want to say. People are relentless and resilient, and they find a way to make it work. And so it's never all of the most talented people who are getting the jobs. It's the people who are the right combination or the right time, or they know the right people or whatever, right? And so
That's right.
The diversity of the opportunities was a byproduct of the relationships that I had, and then the testament to the work that I had done, I guess, to that point.
Right. And Will does this a lot, as you rely on your previous work to speak for itself, right? Just continue to be doing great things, and then eventually you will get to a point where you can show people like, this is my history. I don't need to do any of the explaining. I can let this do it for me. Yeah,
and really just don't do it the way that everybody else does it. That's what I want to say. Like when I look at resumes, because I try and help people, with their professional careers, like put logos on there. Right? Like put things that stand out. Like if you've got the Michigan Block M or the Oregon O, like go ahead and make sure that stands out, because there's, allow yourself to differentiate yourself, and have a video resume, and be engaging in these really creative, new, different ways that add value that people have never seen before.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely. So you get into broadcasting, and then around 2016, you make a big jump. And so what is that phone call like?
So I'm on my bike to Coronado Brewing Company. I'm on 5th and D in Coronado. 2nd and Orange is 3 blocks away. And Coach Harbaugh's like, "Hey, JT, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing great. Hey, Coach, you ever thought about going for 2 more often? The expected yield and the probabilities of it. I really think that going for 2's, just kind of a better deal, And he's like, yeah, we'll think about that. And then he's like, "How'd you like to be the director of operations for the football coach at Michigan?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay. That's the job. You're offering me a job to work for you, kind of in like third person, which is kind of weird." I'm like, I don't know. I got to talk to my girlfriend. Mara and I, we were cohabitating together at that point, and I thought that she would say yes, but she was on a work trip. She had front loaded with a pleasure trip. So she was she's brilliant, and she's an auditor for Deloitte, but she had gone to Austin, Texas. Shout out Kurt and our guy who was here earlier. She was down there on a work trip. And so I call her up. She's like, "Hey, I just got offered a job working in Michigan. What do you think?" She's like, "Nah, I'm not really in a state of mind to really be able to talk about it right now. So let's talk about it tomorrow." And so, I get up and Eastern Standard Time, Detroit, Ann Arbor, 3 hours ahead. So I'm at 10th and Orange, and I'm at Clayton's Mexican takeout, little side, shout out Clayton's, little side takeout window, and I get a call again, and Coach is like, "Hey, JT, have you thought any more about the offer?" I'm like, "Yeah, I haven't yet talked to my girlfriend yet." He's like, "Well, let me give you somebody else to talk to," and he puts his dad on the phone, and his dad was my running backs coach my freshman year. And I've got the most respect in the world for Jack Harbaugh. Just about everybody does. And so he starts pitching me, and it's basically like, we got to go. And so I call Mara at that point, And she's a little disoriented, but she's like, if you want to do this, let's do it. And so she jumped.
Maybe that was the best. You got her hung over, so it was kind of like she didn't care what you were saying. Just get off the phone.
It's almost like you're getting recruited again.
Yeah.
Like-
Yeah.
It is all over again, right?
Well,
He was
I guess
telling you to
the
wait by
first
the
time,
phone.
but it's
Well,
almost like you're getting recruited.
You know, I have always wanted to do right by him and by people that, to me, you know, he was like, he didn't know what the salary was. He didn't know what the relocation package was. He didn't know anything. And that's not his job. Like, his job's to coach football.
Right.
And so I was just like, yeah, sure. I'm in, you know, and so.
Was it nice to make him wait by the phone for a change?
Good. Yeah. Turnabout's fair play.
Yeah.
It was a little unnerving. You know, your first, you know, your college football coach, you always look up to them. You always have a reverence and a respect for them, and him especially. So, you know, working with him and having the opportunity to still have a great relationship with him is special.
Yeah. And I mean, I've read multiple articles and people have more than touched on your relationship with Jim Harbaugh and the whole Harbaugh family. So I won't get too much into it, but I know that you guys have done a podcast together, which is something that we would love to hear more about because we are now entering that world. So what was that like? What was that like?
Well, it was great. You know, he basically named it, and then, again, he's coaching football and I'm his director of ops and comms. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is what the structure is going to be like, and I'll get all the guests, and you guys just need to show up. Here's the script. And so literally he would just show up and, you know, off the top of his head and do whatever it was. And sometimes he would just, you know, go on a complete tangent because it's his show and that's what he wants to do. And other times he would just fall right in and just keep showing up. And it was crazy, the amount of listenership and learning about the whole podcast industry. And it's still so young. There's still so much opportunity. And so multi-purposing the content and placing it on different platforms and everything is still something that people are woefully deficient in. And so you guys are on the right track with videoing it and all this stuff. But it was a lot of fun. And the guests were all great too. I mean, Judge Judy.
You had some
Ric
great
Flair.
guests on that show. So great guests.
So, I mean, Troy Aikman, you know, Rich Eisen, you know, ton and so much fun, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. What? Just real quick before we take another break, what was it like? Did you ever sit there and think, "Wow, this is what I'm doing"? I'm sitting in Jim Harbaugh's dad's living room or wherever you guys were making a podcast. You never thought about it, never dawned on you?
No, the chief from Super Troopers, Brian something rather. He's an actor, and he said when he was younger, he just would get all pent up about, you know, which jobs he was getting and what auditions he was going to. And he said this great quote, and I highlighted it and I pinned it up. It was the only thing that I pinned up on at the office at Michigan in my little cubicle. And it just says it's only about doing the work. And so if you get sidetracked and you start, you know, loving the access and all the stuff that you're doing and enamored with the opportunity and everything, you just get distracted. So when I was there, just put blinders on and just, you know, kept going. And so 2 years felt like 5. I mean, it was just like drinking through a fire hose, 100-hour weeks, you know, and the football, people don't know what it's like, you know, to work hard until you work inside of a football program. It's like, you know, life or death.
Yeah. We'll take a break right there. So, I mean, amazing to have a podcast with Jim Harbaugh and like have those experiences. That must have been, I mean, unbelievable for anybody, especially for just someone who's a casual football fan or someone who doesn't understand the intensive work that takes and just what's on the line every game and every day. It's got to be a grind. So did you get out of it because you just felt your time had ended, or was it more you were just done with the grind? You couldn't take this like 3,000-hour work week every week? There
is no work-life balance. I know that's a popular term, and I prefer work-life integration. You know, it sounds more emotionally intelligent and sophisticated. It's the same thing. But, you know, there just is no alternative. It's you are totally consumed, and everything that you see is through that lens. And so, you know, my wife is from Washington. You know, we didn't have any family in Michigan. The opportunity to move out west, and I ended up briefly working for QB Collective, which is an amazing startup that has tons of potential and opportunity and ties to Matt LaFleur and Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and everything like that. Like, that was something I definitely wanted to jump at, and still have great connections with Richmond Flowers and some of the players and the parents that I met through there. So
that must have been very rewarding, by the way. I read a little bit about what you did with them, working with younger kids and developing them, right? So it just seems like a great opportunity.
Yeah, that is, you know, it's not like a cash grab like a lot of these developmental schemes. It's really just putting professional coaching with high school quarterbacks, and then layering in cognitive testing and layering in different evaluations and improvement plans and everything. And so hopefully the game gets more intelligent that way. And so to be a part of that, that project was something that was really special.
Yeah. So what was it you or your wife that ultimately brought you out to Washington?
So my wife's from Enumclaw, so she went to Enumclaw High. She's now the girls golf coach, the head golf coach at Enumclaw
Shout
High.
out to Enumclaw High.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're killing it this year.
Yeah, well, hopefully they get a year to kill.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's been tough with all the restrictions and everything, but
Golf course has got to be the first thing to open up, right? You're so far away from everybody, and you're outside.
Yeah, you would think that you would be distanced enough, certainly. But she's a better golfer than I am, a better basketball player than I am. So it's very humbling to be in my house. You've got a kid that's cuter than you, a wife that's smarter than you, more accomplished, better GPA. She was a valedictorian in high school, all-state basketball player, won a state championship as a golfer. It's like, yeah, I've got some accolades. But,
some?
Yeah, but I have
3 pages here.
I know. Well, she's got 7 pages, and she only brings them out when she doesn't want to bring out the other 25 that she's got.
Well, you marry up, right? That's the goal, right?
Outpunt your coverage, man.
Yeah, you get what you settle for, And so, I would tell, there's no reason that you can't get somebody who's phenomenal. Both of her brothers are valedictorians, too. So, I did the math. It's like, okay, well, graduating class 250, you literally multiply 1 divided by 250 by 1 over 250 by 1. It's like 1 in millions. It's impossible to find people like that. So find somebody that's amazing, and don't settle for anything less than what it is you want for yourself. And the power of positive thinking and the law of attraction will bring it to you.
Yep, absolutely, man. I couldn't have said it better myself. So you now host your own podcast.
Yep.
It's called If You Don't Grind, and you've had a lot of awesome guests on there. Just Adam Scheffner is one that comes to mind. Like I said, you had your neighbor on there who was a World War II veteran, which was actually really interesting. It's not someone I would have thought you would have had on your podcast, but it was interesting to hear about. And so you're hosted by the Barstool Network, or how does that actually work?
No, so we've got relationship with Barstool and Dan Katz, and just was able to drop in and have kept in contact with Dan, and certainly a lot of respect for what they're doing. But no, I've got it on Apple Podcasts. My shout out to Chris Donovan, my podcast editor. He's edited, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shaquille O'Neal and tons of different podcasts and everything. So he does a great job making sure the audio sounds right. So all I have to do is record the interviews and do an intro and an outro. And most of the podcasts now are sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs and LinkedIn Talent Solutions. So I've got a little bit of a hustle there and able to get a little bit of podcast, advertising revenue. And it's a lot of fun. But really, I started it because there were really interesting people with really interesting stories. And then I had friends who also had similarly interesting insights and intelligence. And I just wanted to put everyone on the same platform and the same pedestal. And so, everybody has a uniqueness about you. And so I've got a friend who failed Navy SEAL training. Has anybody ever talked to somebody who's failed Navy SEAL training and understood what it is they're talking about? And he said he quit because he felt like he was letting down his team. And he was a collegiate soccer player and really good, And so now, is that the truth, or is that a fabrication? Is that a defense mechanism that he uses? I'm not Sigmund Freud or anything close to a psychologist, but it's interesting to hear people and then how that relationship or how that experience colored the rest of his life. And, he's thrilled with what he's doing right now, and he's got a beautiful family and everything. But, and then I've interviewed Navy SEALs and some who are, maybe trying to figure out what direction they go in. You're a trained killer. Okay, what do you do after you can't kill any more people? It's like Major Payne. Like, there's no one left, Payne. You've killed them all.
And you've also interviewed, and I'm blanking on the name. It was Sandy, and it starts with an M.
Sandy Montag.
And he was John Madden's agent.
Yeah,
right?
and an agent for tons of guys.
Right, yeah. The list goes on and on with his.
Mike
Tirico he got to travel with John Madden, and you got to hear a few stories about the Madden trips there.
Yeah, the Madden cruiser. And finally, he's just like, I'm not going to keep driving with you all across the country on this bus.
I have 300 other clients. I don't know why I'm here.
Your fear of flying is really getting in the way of me having any sort of social life or managing other clients.
Yeah, I'd imagine that guy has a million stories that you couldn't even have time to get to.
Right. So we, I didn't get my name in the credits other than a special thanks, but I definitely helped produce the Amazon series, and I know I sound like I'm
really
complaining
no, man.
Or something.
Yeah.
But I would review every episode, and I'd be like, hey, do you really need to show like, Rashawn like tearing up there, like that might not be the right look for that, or that doesn't make sense for that scene or whatever that was. And so, really going back and forth and seeing how a series like that is made and the negotiations and the timing and, really learned a lot about kind of the production of it. And Sandy's just world class. He's a phenomenal person who's managed a lot of relationships really well for a really long time and is about his business. And so again, to be surrounded by people like that, you learn from them and you start to see traits of greatness and what the best people do and how they're always complimentary and they're always sending gifts and thank yous and defaulting to saying yes. I mean, Adam Schefter couldn't have been any busier the day that I talked to him, but he's like, yeah, okay, let's do this. Let's crank this thing out. And was so gracious and always gets back to me via text message. You got people that are, great at what they do and you see their traits of greatness and then you just try and, pluck from them. And so hopefully that's what my podcast does, is it ties together the different strands of greatness that everyone, showcases in their own way.
Yeah, I absolutely think it does. And you do a great job on that podcast. It's very positive. For people who haven't heard it, it's a great listen. He has so many cool guests on there. For people that don't know how hard it would be to get some of the guests that he has on here, he's got amazing connections. So again, give it a listen. It's called If You Don't Grind, and it's on Apple Podcasts. If you just Google it, it comes right up. So you are possibly the most positive person I've ever met. How do you keep that going? And that's a big tenet in your podcast. You tag the start of every podcast with "If you don't grind, you don't shine." How do you stay so positive?
Success is a lease that's renewed daily. Rent's due, at 12 o'clock a.m., right? And so just showing up every single day, putting my best foot forward and needing to do that for so much of my life, and to manifest my success and to create it, and then to see the byproduct of my hard work and the extroverted nature of who I've become, right? And so I've needed to corral that a little bit, but it just always turns out great for me. Just defaulting to action and treating people well and doing all that is really, it's part of the secret sauce to being successful and getting outside of your comfort zone, right? Like be demonstrative, be expressive, be different, be authentic, be genuine, and be positive, because there are enough people who aren't doing that.
Yeah. I agree. 100% agree. And you've said a thing that I've now remembered on occasion. It is what it is. It is what you make it. Is what a lot of people default to. It is what it is, but it's not. It is what you make it.
There are so many adages out there that people use, like fake it till you make it. Like I would rather face it until I make it, right? And there are so many phrases that are just played out, and people just, they just default to them because it's easy. And but take control of your life, right? Like take ownership of it, do what you want to do. And what I tell people is I say, find the intersection of what you're good at, what you like, and what other people say you're good at. And try and find the smartest people, the most objective people, not your mom who's going to tell you that you're great at everything, but find that intersection, draw like that Venn diagram, the three circles, and where you are in the middle. And so for me, it's like, okay, I'm kind of like funny and outgoing and I'm good on camera and I'm a good communicator, right? And so like do more of that. And so within the, I tried to do the influencer who influences the influencers on Instagram, like making fun of people who do all that. My wife doesn't let me do it anymore, but I'm like, oh my God, you should look at this thing. This is a glass ball. Oh, it's worth like $10,000. But if you go into my link in my bio, you're going to get 30% off, or like cardboard boxes or whatever, I'm like, oh my God, this is so great.
The herbal tea game.
Yeah, come on, like anything. So just do that. And like I said, people, they treat relationships as transactional, this for that. I would challenge you to treat them as experiential. Every time I go to Starbucks, and I go most days, and shout out to we're in the Starbucks capital, Seattle here, and truthfully, I'd rather go to craft coffee places, but I'm in Enumclaw and they don't have them, and so I go to Starbucks, right? But I go there and I try and make their day better every day, because everyone that they see is like, yeah, I'll take a latte, please. Like, anything else? No. Okay, great. It'll be $3.27. Great. Cash or app, and then coffee and on their way. And so, one day I rolled up there, I'm singing Be Our Guest, from, Beauty and the Beast. And sometimes I'm talking in Spanish or like a foreign accent or asking for things that aren't on the menu, and it's like, why not?
I've actually seen that on LinkedIn. I saw the Be My Guest one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so it's like, you go to Starbucks and you're like, do you guys do broccoli? I'm like, no, we don't have any broccoli. We've got like a ham and cheese sandwich. I'm like, no.
It's not really the same, is it?
No. They're like, God, do you guys have anything like Gatorade? And they're like, no, we've got like this Lavo tea. Like, yeah, that's not, And so, and normally they know that it's me. And so, the gig's up, because I've been there like, 200 times or whatever. But it's like, imagine if you went through life where you weren't just treating everything as a means to an end, right? Like you actually invested in the people. And again, the people that I've worked with and that I work for, like I had no reason to think that an intern in the Michigan football department who's working there unpaid would eventually be, working alongside of me, trying to build something awesome, and giving me the opportunity to be able to do that, right? Like it would be amazing. And so many people in the building treated him like an intern.
Right. So people don't forget where you came from, right? It's so hard sometimes to break out of that shell of like, if you were the water boy for 10 years, but now you're the head coach, there's going to be people around that still look at you as the water boy.
And that's why sometimes you have to leave places, right? That's why you've got to leave jobs. That's why you've got to break that, that cycle, the way that people think about you. And so, and to some extent, Coach Harbaugh always thought of me as that 19-year-old guy, and so I had to work hard to try and break that habit and to show creative thought and to take license. And that was a challenge. There were so many awesome challenges in working for him and with him. But like, yeah, it's a legitimate challenge that people typecast you as that guy who does that thing. You're like Adam Sandler. You can do funny movies.
So I'm curious. Pete Carroll has his win forever philosophy.
Yeah.
His idea is that everyone has a philosophy. They just haven't defined theirs. And all the factors that contribute to that one pyramid philosophy, right? So I'm curious, do you have one? Have you defined yours?
The $1 billion idea that I have, and it's not about the money, but it's about, giving access to mentorship for everyone. Like that's what I want. Like there's no reason we're in the 21st century and people don't understand this. Like the printing press was invented like hundreds of years ago. And so forever it was encyclopedias and people are like, hey, look at all this knowledge I've got. And then like 20 years ago, they're like, hey, take a look at the internet and you can get all of this information at the palm of your hands. But we still have geniuses taking their knowledge to the grave. We still have, only as much information on Warren Buffett as he wants to have out there. And so I want everyone to be able to have access. And plenty of people have plenty of knowledge. And that's part of what my podcast is like, hey, tell your story about going to jail for armed robbery for 5 years and then how you went to community college and then how you got your master's degree. Like a lot of people need to hear that, but you don't have a platform for it because you don't feel compelled or you're not refined or, the megaphone isn't loud enough to get it out to places. And so I want to help people enrich the quality of their life through recognizing their own personal greatness and then empowering them to work towards achieving it, which is what I say at the end of every one of my podcasts. And so I didn't give you a pyramid, I gave you some shape of something, that hopefully is distilled down, not like a John Wooden pyramid, but it's, there's enough of that in there to answer your question. Sure.
Yeah.
It seems to me like just through this conversation, it seems to me that the biggest tenet you have is don't shy away from confrontation. In any sense of the word, right? Like if you're on the football field, don't shy away from the hit. If you're walking up to the Starbucks barista, don't shy away. Don't put your card in the thing and just like look down like most people do, right? What an interesting phenomenon that I comment on a lot is I notice that when I get into my elevator in the apartment complex, that if there's somebody else there, they'll take the stairs knowingly.
Yeah.
Like they will avoid the confrontation of even having to stand in the same room with me. And this is pre-COVID. This isn't like something that just came about because COVID, but our generation just seems to shy away from that confrontation. They seem to, when the punches come in, they duck, they don't look, right? And you're a rare situation where it's the exact opposite. Do you think that it was something that you've obviously developed it over a long time and now it's just a habit? Do you think that it's a muscle that you exercised and now it's just second nature?
Yeah, you said it best. Like it's a muscle that you exercise. I want you to imagine that there's somebody in an elevator and the door's open and you walk in there. Mm-hmm. What do you do?
Well, that's exactly what I was trying, because I noticed this myself.
Yeah.
And I've been, especially now, I'm not sure how you feel, but after having a son, it totally changed my perspective on everything. it changed, and it was forced on me because I would go into an elevator, and my son's he's not an uggo, he's a cute kid, and people will say hi to him, and not to me. So I have to go out of my way to make sure that I'm also saying hi, and not just looking at my son and say hi, buddy. You know, I'm now avoiding the actual confrontation, and I'm deflecting to my son. Does that make sense? But I want to show him that you say hi to people. You don't just look away. You don't walk the other way. You have the conversation. You move on with your life. So do you think that your perspective changed, or was there a specific moment that you realized, like, I need to start doing this and I need to start like going towards it? You've just always been that way.
Always that way. I watched videos of myself 5 years old, like making smoothies, and it was the most annoying thing ever. I almost, tried to punch myself through the television. But I think that people are endeared to that, and if you think about all the different ways that you can get into an elevator, and if you can read the person, you can really make it a special occasion. And so, hitting on, members of the opposite sex or whatever, like there's always an opportunity there, right? You get in there and be like, God, man, I hope this elevator doesn't crash like it did last time. Yeah. Or like, hey, how much for you to press all the buttons? Huh? I did this last time. It was so great. We're like, or Otis, oh God, that was my grandpa. My grandpa built this elevator. Oh my God, and like you can just.
He builds all of them.
Yeah. Like, have you ever been in an elevator that doesn't have my grandpa's name on it? They're like, Otis isn't your grandpa.
Yeah.
Like, well, his name was Otis, but they cut off the E because it was silent and he was German. So like you just go and run with it, right? And then just keep running with it, right? Like that's the stuff that I like to do, and beating a dead horse until, it's I don't know, deader than dead.
Sure. And people, I try to stay, it's such an old concept that everybody heard in kindergarten, but just remove the word can't from your vocabulary, right? Like people say, I can't do that. I can't hit on this girl. I can't. And what you can, you have the ability, you're just not.
Yeah.
You won't. There's a difference.
And everybody's going through something, right? And I think that was one of my biggest flaws growing up, is that they say treat other people the way that you want to be treated. And I was really resilient. And so I would treat people like I would want to be treated. And so I was like, having jokes at their expense because I was fine if people had jokes at my expense. But, I've started to understand and recognize that you can always be great to someone, to anyone, to everyone, right? And so I've tried to do that as well as I could and be conscientious of that. And having a good partner that way has helped me, that starts to bring you in from the polar extremes of behavior. So, and
you also realize how much you can change someone's day with just a wave or a smile, or how much it really does brighten someone's day if you're just nice to them for no reason. Yeah, it does change.
In particular, when everyone is not, right? I mean, I mentioned Starbucks, but it can be a convenience store. It can be, and giving out compliments, right? They don't have to be empty compliments, but you can tell somebody, especially if you're not coming on to them, like, oh man, you've got like a great smile, like you have a phenomenal smile. Like I can see all 28 of your teeth, and they're like 28. We're like, well, yeah, unless you have wisdom teeth, I guess 32. Did you get them taken out? Only a couple taken out. I had mine taken out last week, and so yeah, you have the license and the opportunity to brighten the days of everyone that you come into contact with, and it's exhausting. You can't do it. But if you can just be conscientious and say, hey, I'm going to decide to have a good day, and I'm going to decide to help other people, you'll go a long way. Right.
And we're going to take our last break right here.
Cool.
So yeah, we're back. This will be our final segment of the night. We were just having a good conversation about just being in common, getting enjoyment out of surprising certain people. I think it's a phenomenal outlook on life and how you treat people. Trying to just treat others how you like to be treated. I guess we can go into that a little bit more if you want.
It's just it's an opportunity, right? And if you treat every interaction as an opportunity to make someone happier, to give them knowledge, to equip them with something that makes them better than they were before, there'll be an appreciation there. And so, the last couple of years for me have been really big into personal and professional development, and they kind of exist concurrently, but you can compartmentalize them into different things. And so for me this year, I want to focus on learning Spanish. I've got a goal to do that, and I'm on my way.
¿Cómo está?
Estoy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú?
Yeah. Oh, muy bien, muy bien. Yo trabajo en cocinas por muchos años, pues yo puedo hablar en español. Más o menos.
Necesitan, ¿no? Right? Yeah. Porque cuando viviendo en San Diego, cerca de la frontera, por 30 años, yo estudio en colegio y universidad también.
¿A huevo?
Sí, por supuesto.
Yeah. It's kind of
I'll add the subtitles.
yeah. It's almost imperative at some point, right? Like especially if you're living in Southern California, or for me, I worked in kitchens and manual labor jobs a lot, so mostly Hispanic people. If you want to know what's going on, you better learn Spanish.
So I had housekeepers over the other day, and they speak Spanish, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna get going on my New Year's resolution, and it's not a resolution, it's just something I wanted to do better this year. Like I don't need January 1st to flip the switch for me to like start doing something.
Right.
So I was speaking to them, a couple weeks ago, and then all of a sudden I'm starting to get ads in Spanish on YouTube. It's like.
They're watching.
Yeah,
Big Brother's
come on.
watching.
And they're listening.
Yeah.
So how are you learning that, by the way?
I haven't picked it out yet. Just trying to evaluate, whether it's Babbel or Rosetta Stone, or I had a friend who said they were using a different app. So I just kind of want to evaluate it, and just like I do the knees over toes for the vertical jump stuff. Just set goals, things that you do and you want to achieve, and then hold yourself to it.
Just force yourself to talk. Force it.
Yeah.
Really. If the best way because I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, didn't learn anything.
Sure.
But 2 years into just being immersed, I'm not fluent, but I can hold a conversation.
It's,
Will learned Italian too the same way. Just do it, right? Just
un
force
poquito.
yourself.
But in my experience learning it and being self-taught, I would recommend doing Rosetta Stone because it's by association, right? It's like you look at pictures and you start to associate certain things with words. But also do Duolingo on your phone. Yeah. And it's like 5 minutes a day. And as long as you're doing it every day, you'll start to pick up on it and you'll just start to get better and better. So I think I don't know if there's one that's better than the rest, but just a combination is what I would recommend.
We're also getting a nod for Babbel also from our producer. Yeah. So check that out too, man.
The Mikey.
Yeah. In the building, also our first guest and producer and videographer. So he's
like JT, man of many hats.
Man of many hats.
Yeah, love it.
So just as closing, because I really wanted to ask you about this, and you touch on it a lot in your podcast, that you touch a lot on the importance of mentorship and having good mentors in your life and being a good mentor to other people and younger people. And I apologize if I get his name wrong, but your mentor, you've said, is Frank Bartonetti.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about him and how that came to be?
Oh yeah, Frank has helped me to understand, what love is, and it's helped to frame my way of looking at the world. And so, religion is complex, and people fight wars and they die over it and everything. And so for me, and shout out to the local ambulances if you guys hear that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to deny or disavow anyone else's religion by saying that my religion's right. Like Christianity and Judaism, somebody believes that Jesus is the Son of God, and the other religion doesn't. And so for me, God is love, right? And I believe that all religions exist, and Jesus is a manifestation of love in the world, and love can exist in people and places and things and everything. And so Frank has helped me to understand, how to tap into love and situational awareness and achieving my own personal best. And so he's worked with tons of athletes, and he's old. He's like 90 years old, right? I called him tonight, left a message. He wished me a Merry Christmas. He is so great, and he worked with the Pacific Institute and Trevor Moawad and Bob Moawad and
also I'm spacing on his name. I apologize, but someone you had on your podcast also, Frank Gibson, was that right? You had someone on your podcast that I think was affiliated with Frank Bartonetti, but maybe that was just something
Kirk Gibson.
Kirk Gibson,
yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Kirk, hit maybe the most famous home run in World Series history, off of one leg, off of Dennis Eckersley.
Yeah. Yep. Apologize. Sorry.
Yeah, and I interviewed Kirk and Kirk mentioned Frank, and I'm like, I'd like to talk more to Frank. Just, if he did great things for you, somebody like that would be interesting. And he's like, well, he's actually out in Seattle. And I'm like, well, so am I. And I'm like, hey, Frank, I interviewed, Kirk. He's like, yeah, I don't do interviews. I'm like, no. This is an interview. I just want to talk to you. He's like, okay. And then the more we talked, the more he was helping, and, is doing it out of the kindness of his heart, and is just is helping me to see the world, and his outlook on family and love and children and just the things that he's learned are so incredible. And so in some small way, if I can pass on 1/100th of what he gives me to someone else, then I'll feel like I will have done a good job. And so there are high school and college players that, I am trying to help learn from my experience and the experiences of others, that if I knew then what I knew now, or what I know now, then I would be in a better position. And so I try and help them in that way. And so it's rewarding that way. It's fulfilling. It's tough to be, again, everything to everyone, but it's something that I think is important and I like focusing on.
Yeah. And if you could maybe summarize one thing without giving too much away, you don't have to show all your cards, but what's something that he said to you that really holds true or really resonates with you?
He said, when you look into your son's eyes, all you see is love, just, pure love. And he talks about the things that people do to their children out of love, but, a fractured love. They think that they're doing their kids favors. And, so just the concept of love and how people express that, and, how you can find true, genuine, authentic love inside of the eyes of children and how beautiful they are. And then, the things like the college admission scandal where people are, paying for their kids to have tests taken for them, and they're doing for them what, they should be doing for themselves and stuff. And so somewhere along the line, things get fractured. And so he just, he's mentioned that. And so just the relentless positivity and optimism and giving people the benefit of the doubt, and, and just defaulting to love. But at the same time, keeping it real. If people aren't doing things and they're not, holding themselves accountable, he's got no problem calling them on it either. So it's, it's tough to get a real one, an OG, and he's got, he's got a history. He's never been, he hasn't been like, God's gift to the world of human beings, and, a step below Mother Teresa his whole life. But, you learn along the way. And so that's what it is, right? It's a process, and you evolve and you grow and you refine your skills and you keep developing, and you put your best foot forward day after day. And then, you see where it all adds up at the end.
Yeah. And I would imagine, I know your son is a bit younger than mine. My son's about 4, but I know at that age, I really was constantly thinking about the future, about when he starts to talk, when he starts to walk. How do you think that you're going to impart those lessons onto your son?
It's a challenge because, my grandpa was exceedingly wealthy and lost it all.
We forgot to get into that. I would love to hear the story if you got a second.
Yeah, so he owned the largest single-family home in Southern California at one point in the 80s, just acres and acres on the coast in La Jolla, hosted campaign parties for Ronald Reagan, and then just over-leveraged himself, lost it all, moved to Utah, converted to Mormonism, became a millionaire again. Actually told me that like Vince Carter was going to dunk over me in a slam dunk competition, and didn't, unfortunately.
That would have been amazing.
I know.
Would have had awesome footage of that.
Amazing footage.
But so he's, so that when that exists in your lineage, then your dad, my dad learns how to drive in a limousine, and they've got a helicopter pad. You start to be spoiled by some of this stuff, right? And throwing the most awesome parties like known to mankind, right? I wasn't there, but shortly thereafter I was certainly conceived. And so when you talk about, how do you raise your son, you try and give him the best canvas possible, right? And you try and raise him with as much love as possible, but you don't do for him what he can do for himself, right? And you make him tough but not too tough. It's a delicate balance, and that's why we're up here, because we are surrounded by people. And if we've talked about, you are, the sum of the 5 people you hang around with the most, if you average, wealth, intelligence, style, et cetera, we're around some really good people, right? We're around her brothers who live really close. And again, both valedictorians, really smart, good, quality people, her parents who obviously raised them. So surrounding our child, and then obviously getting as much of my family as possible, even though my mom and sister are in New York City, my dad's in Aruba, but surrounding him with love and all of that. And then this coronavirus has been an immense blessing for me. I used to commute 3 hours total round trip each day to work, to and from. And then I just traded that in for 3 hours at home each day. My commutes, from my bed to the couch.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of people have been, jokingly, I think, saying that it's been a negative being inside with your family constantly. And I'm sure if you have like a teenager or something, I can't imagine myself in high school being cooped up in the house all day. But I agree. It's given me an opportunity to spend a lot more time with my family and my son. And so in a way, it is a blessing. it is definitely a blessing to be able to spend time, especially when they're so young.
People have used coronavirus as an excuse for everything, right? Like I gained weight, I lost weight, I learned a language, I'm $10,000 poorer, like whatever, I mean, all of it. And so, and that's the microcosm for life, right? It's just, whatever the circumstances are, you can find a way, if it's important, you'll find a way. If it's not important, you'll find an excuse, right? And so just decide to, be the change that you want to see in your own life and get it done, right? Like my mom and sister are like, well, we're looking at like a diet or a workout plan. What do you think? I said, okay, step 1, stop eating all that shit. Step 2, take your ass to the gym. Step 3, repeat, right? Like it's really, really easy. And with, a few exceptions, like, people have, heart conditions or whatever, right? Like, okay.
Yeah, but those excuses are always so, I hate when people bring up exceptions because it's so silly. That's obviously not what you meant, like when you say, oh, everybody does, it's like, okay, I obviously didn't mean everybody, and I think a majority of the people, if you just, and I'm guilty of it myself. I don't work out as much as I should. I don't eat right as much as I should. And I don't think any of us do it as much as we would like to. But you just, like you said, you set goals for yourself and you wake up with the mindset every day of trying to work towards that goal. Right?
And try it. Like I love throwing myself in the deep end. I take a cold shower to end my shower. So I start off hot and then the last 13 breaths typically are all cold. As cold as the water will be. I was out in Roslyn area last week. Just, cold water. It's like freezing water, but it's like, do that, right? And so I had for a couple of weeks, I woke up Monday through Friday at 3 a.m, right? Because I was trying to help somebody else get out of bed early at 5 a.m, their time, Central Time. Like, just do it. Mm-hmm. Just do it. Expose yourself to it, right? And because, and after we get out, like I'm buying the TriCaster, so you motherfuckers have to do it, right? So you guys, if I have another excuse, so that just do the thing, you know what I'm saying, right? And that's what it is. And so that's what I did with the podcast. I'm like, I'm going to record it, I'm going to do the video, and if I get 100,000 followers or I don't get anything, like I'm exposing myself to it. And more than anything, it's just a library. It's a place for the content to live that people can always point back to. I've got a couple solo podcasts where I'm like, listen to that thing, listen, take from that, understand what that says, and see if any of that resonates with you, right? And so, that's what it is. Just do it. Man, Nike really hit a home run with, right? Yeah.
Just a friend of mine, I consider him a mentor in some capacities, but he's got this saying, and I might butcher it, but it's something along the lines of, if you just say the things that you're going to do and you just show up and do the work, you're ahead of like 90 to 95% of people. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not your best work, even if it's not like even if you're not reinventing the wheel, doing phenomenal, revolutionary work, just showing up and doing it is like 90%.
Yeah, and the famous director Woody Allen said 70% of life is showing up, right? Yeah. And it's like, just show up, keep going. And that's what it was for me my freshman year at USD, was just guys were taking practices off and I would just keep showing up. And 60% of me was a lot better than 0% of me and 0% of anyone else, right? So you just keep showing up and then, the things end up going your way. And so maybe not today, maybe not next week or next month or next year, right? But you just keep doing it. And if you read Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I've gotten into a lot of reading, right? It's like you just keep doing the thing and aggregating all the small wins, all the small gains, and they end up adding up and they add up to a lot.
Yeah,
right?
I remember, not to go back to my friend at Oregon that played for the Ducks, but when he was there, he was playing for Chip. And like I said, he was a walk-on. No one knew who he was. I don't think he might have been like a 2-star recruit, like maybe. I don't know. But he wanted to play for the Ducks, who he played for. And I remember he told me that after one practice, he said, Will, if Chip, this is what Chip told him. He goes, if some of these 5-star recruits played with your same level of heart, I can't imagine where this team would be. And it's an attitude. It's all in how you approach it. It's your attitude.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the hardest thing to cultivate in a kid, like you were talking about. And we all start as children, right? And you were talking about how you're going to raise your son and the opportunities you're going to give him. You want to obviously give him opportunities, but you don't want to do the work for him, right? And I think that it's so easy to, when you're that talented, to just look at it as an excuse, which is the way, life's way of balancing out, right? Like if everybody that talented was that hardworking, there'd be no room for people like us.
For sure. Like my favorite quote though is, so many people in life are standing on third base thinking that they hit a triple.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And,
no shit.
And nobody in life has done anything, has done everything on their own, including being born, right?
Right.
Like you had a mom, you had a dad, you've got people who got you to where you're at. You are not self-made. A lot of people are like pinch runners. They're on third base, they're pinch running. There's a deep pop fly to the warning track, might even go over the fence. They can just walk home. It's like when you work hard for what you have and you've got an appreciation for it, the commitment is so much greater and you're so much more invested. The more you deposit, the harder it is to take all that out. It's just you're so invested in it. And so yeah, it's I wouldn't trade my athleticism for anyone else's, because the road that I've taken has gotten me to a great spot, and I'm blessed to be where I'm at.
Right, and it's all perspective, right? Like your idea of like athleticism is unrealistic for a person of my, running a 4.5 40 and doing all these things. It's like not something that, if you're right, if I dedicated my life to it, I could probably achieve, but probably not something I'm going to do at this point. So it's just all relative, right? Like,
yeah. And I get that from, I interviewed Alex Montoya on my podcast. The guy's got, 3 prosthetic limbs. He was born with, one leg.
Yeah, I listened to a bit of that one.
Yeah. He came from Columbia and ended up graduating from Notre Dame, and he helps people write books, and he's a motivational speaker.
Right.
Like, you can decide to do that. And there are people who get offended by this statement, but, the only disability in life is a bad attitude.
Right.
And then they have the American with Disabilities Act, where people, want you to use appropriate language and modify buildings and everything. And a lot of those things are really positive advances, but they want, exceptions to be made for them. But that's not everyone. There are people who are very serious about overcoming and achieving in spite of the odds against them. And so if you could, and this is in the Michael Gervais book with Pete Carroll, but the messaging, what we tell ourselves is so much more important than the genetics or than the history or the experience or whatever that is, right? And so we talk about having a short memory. You'd be a great athlete, right? Just that DB mentality.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm the best, look good, feel good, play good. Let's go out there, let's get it, and be authentic and be genuine. And every single time you're betting on yourself. And and Kanye West said it, my confidence plus other people's insecurities equals my arrogance, right? And this was old school Kanye, who I absolutely loved. I saw him on the College Dropout tour. Shout out to 04 Kanye. But that's the truth, right? And so you've got to have that confidence, and you don't want to be so brash, but people want you to be confident but humble, and they want you to be, confident but not too confident, and humble but not too insecure. And this really tight band that people want you to operate inside of. But just love, work hard, do your best, and show up,
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, man. We're going to wrap it up, but I just want to say thank you before we get out of here. You made a long trip. You didn't know us before this, so thank you again, man, for coming out, and congratulations on all your success. Go listen to his podcast. Check him out on YouTube, JT Rogan, on everything pretty much. So just Google him. It'll all come up. It's a great podcast. Awesome guy. Thank you again, man. Really.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you guys.
Yep. Thanks, JT.
Yep.